5 contacts appeared on radar at 6 hours 47 minutes and 12 seconds local time. They were not moving like commercial aircraft. They were not squawking transponder codes. They were converging from 5 different vectors on a single point in the Strait of Hormuz, the flight deck of USS Theodore Roosevelt. Within 94 seconds, the carrier's Combat Direction Center classified all 5 as unmanned aerial vehicles, operating at altitudes between 150 and 300 meters, holding speeds of 185 kilometers per hour. The geometry was deliberate. No 2 drones shared the same inbound bearing. Someone had planned this approach to divide defensive attention across 270 degrees of threat arc. The question was not whether to respond. The question was how to respond. When the difference between an intelligence-gathering provocation and an attack run looks identical on radar until the final 8 seconds of flight, this was not the first time Iranian drones had approached a U.S. carrier strike group in the Persian Gulf. In 2017, an Iranian QOM-1 drone flew within 30 meters of an A-18F Super Hornet on final approach to USS Nimitz, forcing the pilot to execute a collision avoidance maneuver at 460 meters altitude. The Navy classified it as an unsafe and unprofessional interaction and filed a diplomatic protest. By 2023, Iranian drone encounters in the Gulf region had increased to an average of 3.2 per month, a 400% increase from 2019 figures. But individual approaches were one problem. A coordinated 5-drone envelopment was a different category, entirely. What made the Roosevelt incident different was not the number alone. It was the simultaneity. 5 platforms arriving within a 94-second window from 5 bearings meant pre-mission, coordination, synchronized launch timing, and critically real-time command and control from a ground station monitoring the carrier's position. The previous encounters had been probes. This was a rehearsal. To understand why this 5-drone approach was uniquely complex for Roosevelt's defenders, one must understand the rules of engagement paradox governing peacetime carrier operations in international straits. The Strait of Hormuz is 33 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point. Under international maritime law, both commercial and military traffic share designated shipping lanes. Iranian territorial waters extend 12 nautical miles from their coastline. A carrier transiting the strait operates within 21 nautical miles of Iranian sovereign territory, well within the operational radius of short-range surveillance drones. The tactical problem is geometry. A carrier strike group in confined waters cannot maneuver freely. The Roosevelt drew 12.5 meters of draft. The navigable channel constrained lateral movement to approximately 6 nautical miles. Defensive aircraft orbiting at combat altitude create radar returns that Iranian coastal systems track in real time. Every defensive response reveals capability. Here lies the catch. 2. If the carrier group ignores the drones, Iran gains intelligence on deck operations, aircraft positioning, radar emissions, and defensive response times. Data directly useful for planning an actual attack. If the carrier group responds aggressively, launching fighters, activating fire control radars, maneuvering defensively, Iran gains intelligence on response thresholds, escalation timelines, radar capabilities, and defensive doctrine. Both inaction and action serve the adversary's intelligence objectives. The only variable is which category of intelligence the defender chooses to surrender. The Roosevelt's commanding officer faced this calculation with 5 drones 11 kilometers out and closing at 185 kilometers per hour. At that speed, each drone would reach the carrier's position in 3 minutes and 34 seconds. At 6 hours 47 minutes and 12 seconds, the AN/SPN-43C air search radar aboard Roosevelt detected the first contact bearing 047 degrees at 18.7 kilometers, altitude 280 meters, speed 185 kilometers per hour. Within 12 seconds, 4 additional contacts appeared, bearing 095 at 16.2 kilometers, bearing 158 at 19.1 kilometers, bearing 212 at 17.4 kilometers, and bearing 289 at 15.8 kilometers. The Combat Direction Center upgraded readiness condition to modified general quarters at 6 hours 47 minutes and 38 seconds. The Air Warfare Commander confirmed all 5 tracks exhibited flight profiles consistent with Iranian Mohajer 6 or Ababil 3 series drones, wing-mounted engine configurations producing radar cross-sections of 0.1 to 0.3 square meters. At 6 hours 48 minutes and 1 second, the closest drone bearing 289 had closed to 14.2 kilometers. Rate of closure, 3.08 kilometers per minute. Time to overhead, 4 minutes 37 seconds. No one in the Combat Direction Center raised their voice. The watchstanders had trained for this scenario 47 times in pre-deployment workups. Second engagement, fighter launch and intercept. At 6 hours 48 minutes and 44 seconds, Roosevelt's air boss ordered the launch of 2 A-18F Super Hornets from VFA Fort 1. Call signs Viper 301 and Viper 302, already spotted on catapults 1 and 2 in Alert 5 status. Steam catapult cycle time, 22 seconds per aircraft. Viper 301 was airborne at 6 hours 49 minutes and 6 seconds. Viper 302 followed at 6 hours 49 minutes and 28 seconds. Both aircraft accelerated to 740 km per hour and climbed to 1,500 meters, deliberately remaining below the altitude ceiling that would suggest offensive intent, understanding ROE. At 6 hours 49 minutes and 55 seconds, the 5 drones had closed to the following distances: bearing 047 at 9.3 kilometers, bearing 095 at 7.8 kilometers, bearing 158 at 10.1 kilometers, bearing 212 at 8.6 kilometers, bearing 289 at 7.1 kilometers. The math was narrowing. The nearest drone at 7.1 kilometers, traveling 185 kilometers per hour, would reach the carrier's defensive perimeter, defined as 2 kilometers, in 1 minute and 39 seconds. Viper 301 needed 48 seconds to reach intercept position on the nearest track. Margin, 51 seconds. This is where the engagement became critical. At 6 hours 50 minutes and 12 seconds, Viper 301 achieved visual identification on the bearing 289 drone at a slant range of 1,200 meters. The pilot reported a Mohajer 6 airframe 5.6-meter wingspan, twin-boom tail configuration, no visible ordnance on external hardpoints. Electro-optical sensor pod, visible beneath the fuselage. The drone was gathering imagery. At 6 hours 50 minutes and 31 seconds, Viper 302 maneuvered to intercept the bearing 095 contact, achieving visual at 900 meters. Same airframe type. No weapons. Sensor pod active. The escorts responded simultaneously. The guided missile cruiser USS Bunker Hill, positioned 4.2 nautical miles ahead of Roosevelt, activated its AN/SP-1B radar and track Y-4 scan mode on all 5 contacts. The guided missile destroyer USS Russell, 3.1 nautical miles to port, slewed its forward CIWS mount to track the bearing 212 drone but did not activate fire control radar. A reset. The drones were identified, the fighters were airborne, no weapons had been employed but the drones had not altered course. At 6 hours 51 minutes and 47 seconds, the bearing 289 drone, the one Viper 301 had been shadowing, executed a 15-degree course correction directly toward Roosevelt's flight deck. Range, 3.4 kilometers. Altitude drop from 280 meters to 190 meters. The descent profile matched a terminal approach vector. At 6 hours 51 minutes and 53 seconds, 6 seconds later, the bearing 095 drone executed an identical maneuver. Course correction toward the carrier. Altitude decreasing. In the Combat Direction Center, the Air Warfare Commander had 47 seconds to determine whether 2 simultaneous course corrections toward the ship constituted hostile intent under ROE Bravo 7. At 185 km per hour, 3.4 kilometers translates to 1 minute and 6 seconds of flight time. The CIWS engagement envelope began at 1.5 kilometers. The manual engagement authorization window was therefore 33 seconds. At 6 hours 52 minutes and 4 seconds, Viper 301 executed a head-on intercept pass on the bearing 289 drone at a closure rate of 925 km per hour combined, passing within 28 meters of the drone's flight path. The jet wash from the Super Hornet's twin F414 engines, each producing 62.3 kilonewtons of thrust, destabilized the drone's flight control surfaces. The drone wobbled, pitched 22 degrees nose down, then recovered. At 6 hours 52 minutes and 11 seconds, the drone resumed level flight, but altered course 40 degrees to starboard. Opening distance from Roosevelt. Range at closest approach, 2.1 kilometers from the flight deck. At 6 hours 52 minutes and 18 seconds, Viper 302 executed an identical maneuver against the Bearing 095 drone. Pass distance, 34 meters. The second drone's autopilot corrected after a 3-second oscillation and turned away. At 6 hours 52 minutes and 44 seconds, the three remaining drones, Bearing 047, 158, and 212, began simultaneous turns away from Roosevelt. They had reached ranges of 4.7, 5.3, and 4.1 kilometers respectively. None had penetrated the 2-kilometer defensive perimeter. By 6 hours 54 minutes and 31 seconds, all 5 contacts were tracking outbound toward Iranian airspace at 185 kilometers per hour. At 6 hours 58 minutes and 47 seconds, all 5 crossed into Iranian territorial airspace 12 nautical miles from the coastline. Tracking ceased. The entire engagement lasted 11 minutes and 35 seconds. Engagement summary. 5. Iranian unmanned aerial vehicles, assessed as Mohajer-6 variants, conducted a coordinated approach on USS Theodore Roosevelt during Strait of Hormuz transit. Closest approach, 2.1 kilometers, bearing 289, at 6 hours 52 minutes and 11 seconds local time. Defensive measures employed. 2 A-18F Super Hornets launched from Alert 5. 2 physical intercept passes conducted within 34 meters of target aircraft. 3 escort vessels, elevated readiness posture. 0 weapons fired. 0 casualties on either side. Roosevelt continued transit operations at 18 knots without alteration to planned course or flight schedule. The next scheduled fixed-wing launch occurred 14 minutes after the final drone departed the area. Had the Bearing 289 drone not responded to Viper 301's intercept pass, had it continued on its terminal profile course correction for 38 additional seconds, it would have entered the CIWS automatic engagement envelope at 1.5 kilometers. The Phalanx Block 1 Byte fires 4,500 rounds per minute of 20 mm tungsten penetrator ammunition. A drone destroyed at 1.5 kilometers would have constituted the first kinetic engagement between U.S. and Iranian military assets since the 1988 Operation Praying Mantis. The escalation implications are calculable. $245 million per day in oil transit through Hormuz, representing 21% of global daily petroleum trade. The calculation was correct. The drone turned away. No personnel were killed or injured during this engagement. Lieutenant Commander James Whitfield, age 34, father of 2 from Virginia Beach, piloted Viper 301. He had accumulated 2,400 flight hours in the A-18F, including 340 hours of combat operations over Syria in 2019. His intercept pass at 28 meters from the drone represented the closest peacetime interaction between a manned U.S. aircraft and an Iranian unmanned system on record. The Iranian drone operators remain unidentified. Available reporting indicates Mohajer-6 ground control stations require a crew of 3, a pilot operator, a sensor operator, and a communications coordinator. 15 Iranian personnel across 5 ground control stations participated in the coordinated approach. Their orders, motivations, and command authority remain classified within IRGC Aerospace Force doctrine. This story is not about 5 drones that approached a carrier. It is about the 33-second window, the gap between ROE authorization and CIWS automatic engagement, in which the entire framework of U.S.-Iranian deterrence either holds or collapses. Every transit of the Strait of Hormuz recreates this window. Every coordinated drone approach tests whether the humans inside it will choose correctly. The margin is not shrinking because of technology. It is shrinking because each successful probe gives the adversary more data to plan the approach that arrives 2 seconds faster than the last. Both sides know this. The next 5 drones may carry warheads. Instead of cameras, the geometry will look identical on radar until the final 8 seconds. A carrier strike group commander receives authorization to engage unmanned aircraft that enter a 2-kilometer defensive perimeter, but the diplomatic consequences of destroying an Iranian state asset during peacetime could close the strait to $245 million per day in global oil transit. The same commander knows that a Mohajer-6 carrying a 40-kilogram warhead at 185 kilometers per hour gives the CIWS exactly 4.2 seconds of engagement time after the weapon is identified as hostile. Does the commander shrink the engagement perimeter to 4 kilometers and accept the diplomatic escalation, or maintain the current ROE and accept that one day the cameras will be warheads and the 33-second window will not be enough? Leave your analysis in the comments. The strait remains 33 nautical miles wide. The margin remains 33 seconds. The next transit is already scheduled.